Hello, I'm Bailey Leasure, and this is the Leisure Sports Podcast. If you haven't seen my NFL season 2017 NFL prediction video, feel free to watch it as I recorded this video and that video around at the same time. So I'm going to kick off the podcast this week with the my thoughts on the McGregor versus Mayweather fight that happened last weekend. I talked a little about it in my last podcast, but not that much. I saw the fight. Went over to a family member's house and watched it. And Personally, the fight kind of was more entertaining than I thought it would be. I was expecting that fight to go 5 rounds, um, to go, at most maybe 8, and it went 10 rounds. It didn't go the distance. I didn't think it was going to go the distance. If it did go the distance, I would have said McGregor won that fight just for going the distance with Mayweather. But overall, McGregor was impressive. He was very aggressive in the first 5 rounds, but I think after that, like up until the 8th round, 7th or 8th round, I noticed after the 5th he would be aggressive for the first minute, and then Mayweather, who really it looked like did what he always did, where he was he's a defensible boxer, and he was just waiting for McGregor to get tired, and sure enough, he got tired and he jumped on him in those later rounds, and in the 10th round he got that technical knockout against him. Overall, I kind of thought the fight was stopped a little too prematurely. I mean, I don't think McGregor would have gotten out of that 10th round, but I think McGregor said I wanted him to knock me down for me to lose, and I think that's probably what should have happened. Um, but Mayweather, going 50, he announced he retired after this fight, and I think he did. They talked all this trash to each other, especially McGregor after this fight, and then they were very, you know, respectful of each other after the fight. So I'm like, wow, that's a surprise. But McGregor, he was impressive in this, and he didn't really seem that disappointed that he lost. I think he was probably a little bit happy that he went pretty far against, one of the best boxers of all time. So, to go and do that, it's very impressive. So, Gregor, he looked good in their first 5 rounds, but then he just ran out of gas, especially in the 8th round. You knew he looked gassed. So, overall, I mean, I think that there were so many like he was doing these hammer punches, which you're not supposed to do in boxing. And the ref had to like stop. And I remember thinking of it, like, why do you keep doing that? I'm like, eventually this ref's going to call this fight. But then at the same time, there's no way this ref, for how much money is going around it, is going to call this a DQ. There's no way that it's going to stop like that, and it did, unfortunately. But this probably was a more entertaining fight than the Pacquiao fight Mayweather fought a couple years ago. You know, but overall, I think McGregor's going to probably take some time off. I know that he's got a new kid, and he's probably going to train. I think this is, I could see him going back to boxing, but I think he wanted to do this because it was just a big fight. But I think McGregor, he will eventually go back to the UFC and dominate. I mean, the guy's only 29, so he's still young. He's got a lot of years left in him in his fighting career. So, but overall, it was a good fight. It was more entertaining than I thought it would be. But it was a good fight. So, moving on, I'm going to move on to some of the NFL news. I'm going to talk about the same night that the McGregor Mayweather fight happened. Before the fight, I watched a bit of the Cardinals Falcons game, and starters only played one game, and the Arizona Cardinals won that game. They beat the Falcons, I think by about 12 points. I don't remember the score, but Carson Palmer looked pretty good. John Brown looked really good. After he's really been dealing with leg injuries, he caught 2 touchdowns and looked very impressive. Chris Johnson didn't really look impressive. He fumbled a couple times. He looked like he still had some burst, but it didn't work out. It just didn't work out for him, and the Cardinals released him because after the preseason Thursday, last preseason games for everybody ended. The Cardinals didn't play any of their starters. They lost 30-2. I didn't watch that game because I was at the Arizona State Sun Devils opener, which I'll talk about in a minute. But Cardinals made some other cuts. They cut Scooby Wright. They also cut Aaron Dobson, Jeremy Ross, just a couple players right there. But overall, they made their cuts. I know that they're looking. I've looked at reports. They're looking at Andy Lee, but they're trying. Every team's trying to cut their roster right now to 53 men. And there was some other cuts. Before I talk about the cuts, I'm going to talk about other NFL news. Julian Edelman got hurt. He was one of the few players that have gotten hurt in this preseason, and he tore his ACL, and that's a huge loss for the New England Patriots. I talked a little bit in my NFL season prediction video of what his injury is going to, how much of an impact it's going to be on the Patriots, but it's a big loss as he's been one of the very productive receivers over the last couple seasons, so it's a huge loss. The Chiefs running back, Spencer Ware, I believe is his name, looked like this was going to be his big year after they released Jamal Charles, and he's going to be the big man. But in that Seahawks game, he suffered a PCL injury of the knee. He's most likely going to be out for the season, but they're looking at it. But it's just a big loss. Cameron Meredith from the Bears, their top receiver, he suffered a torn ACL and he's done for the year. So it was really a big some big losses for them. So, like I was saying, some other NFL news. Matthew Stafford signed a 5-year, $135 million deal. He's the highest paid player in the NFL history, I think, currently, because I think Aaron Rodgers might become it soon. He'll get a big deal. But Stafford had a really good season last season. It wasn't great for those last couple games going into the playoffs. I mean, they could have, if he lost some big critical games against the Cowboys and the Giants and the Packers. If they were able to win one of those games, maybe they would have been able to win the division. But Stafford looked pretty good without Calvin Johnson. Hopefully he takes a good step in the right direction again and gets the Lions back into the postseason, possibly. So that was that. Joe Hayden, Pro Bowler from the Browns, was cut, and Pittsburgh Steelers signed him to a couple-year deal. So that was one of the surprise trades. T.J. Ward from the Broncos was released. Broncos made some other moves, as I'm talking about Browns-Broncos. Browns paid $16 million to release Brock Osweiler. And breaking news, as I was about to record this podcast, the Broncos re-signed Brock Osweiler, so he's probably going to compete with the quarterback, compete for a quarterback spot. But I think he'll start the regular season as a backup. So, it's not. Maybe he'll do better, but Brock Osweiler, I've never been entirely big on. I remember a couple years ago after he beat the New England Patriots on that Sunday Night Football game. I wasn't big on him. I remember I was talking to one of my classmates in college at the time, and he's like, "Oh, Brock's gonna be the next big quarterback." I'm like, "No, it's gonna be Derek Carr," and it's like, "You're crazy," and I'm like, "No, I think it's gonna be Derek Carr," and sure enough, I kind of was turned right a little bit, but that's what happened. As far as regarding that, other NFL news: DeAndre Hopkins signed a 5-year deal worth $81 million. So, big deal for him. So overall there. Jets made a big trade to the Seahawks. They traded Sheldon Richardson for Jermaine Kearse and a draft consideration that's either going to be a second or third round pick. So big trade happened right before this podcast. Jacoby Brissett from the third stringer saw a little bit of action for the Patriots when Tom Brady was out for the 4-game suspension regarding the Deflategate. They traded him for a first-rounder for wide receiver Philip Dorsett. I think Brissett's going to give some quarterback insurance for the Colts, as Andrew Luck is now officially coming off the physically unable to perform list, but we'll see if he's going to be out the first game or two of the season, so he gives them that. The Patriots get a receiver in Dorsett. We'll see if they can take him and elevate him. I still think it's not going to be able to replace Edelman, but I think the Patriots. Victor Cruz was released from the Bears, and I think really the Patriots should look at him. I think he'd be a good player to replace Edelman, but we'll see what happens there. So moving on to talk a lot about NFL news. I'm going to talk quickly about NBA news. Last podcast I talked about the Kyrie Irving deal to Boston for Isaiah Thomas. Thomas, there was a little bit of question marks about his hip, but they were able to complete that deal. They added a 2020 second round pick to that deal, but that's what happened. So moving on to NHL news before I move into Major League Baseball news, Shane Doan, after being the Coyotes announced a couple months ago that they were moving on from him, retired after a 21-year career. So congrats, Shane Doan. You know, he's been known as Captain Coyote for the Arizona Coyotes for so long. You know, so congrats to him on a great career, and I wish him the best in his future, what he does after. Moving on to Major League Baseball news, I'm going to talk about the Diamondbacks. As I'm recording this, they're on an 8-game winning streak after really they went through a run in August. You know, towards the end of August, they were able to pick it up, back up again, and get the ball rolling again. They're on an 8-game winning streak after sweeping the Giants. Sweeping the Dodgers very impressively, even though they were facing that Dodger team the back end of their rotation. But it was really impressive what they were able to do against Rich Hill. They scored 6 runs off him after, and this is the guy who took a no-hitter into the 10th inning in his last start. Diamondbacks just hit up on them. Dodgers were, they had lost 5 games in a row up until that point. But it's good. The Diamondbacks, as I'm recording this, they have a 4.5-game lead over the Rockies for the top wildcard spot. They started the Rocky series last night and were able to win that game 9-5. So the Diamondbacks, they're looking very impressive, and it's looking, they if they can win this series, they have a really good chance of going to the going in as a top wildcard team. But we'll see what happens there. Nick Ahmed unfortunately broke his wrist. He's out 6 to 8 weeks. So it was a really big loss for them. But he was on a rehab assignment too, looking to come back. But that really was a big blow to the shortstop position. But hopefully Chris Owings is able to come back at the end of the regular season. Diamondbacks are just gonna have to do with Ketel Marte and Adam Rosales. They've made some. They made some September call-ups. They brought up Jimmy Kemphrey, I believe his name is. So that was one of the recent deals that call-ups they made as it's officially September. They recalled Savino Braccio, J.J. Hoover, Braden Shipley were a couple of players, and they released Ruby De La Rosa, who's already out and was having Tommy John surgery. But Savino Braccio came in last night against the Rockies, and he didn't get an out. He faced 3 hitters. I mean, it just seems like every time he gets up, he's just shaky. So I really don't know how many times they're going to give this guy many chances, but we'll see. I just I'm not big on Savino Braccio, but we'll see what happens there. A couple days ago, it was the MLB waiver trade deadline, and there was some couple deals. The Anaheim Angels were probably the most aggressive team. They traded for Justin Upton to the Anaheim Angels. They traded Cameron Maybin was traded to the Houston Astros. Also, Brandon Phillips was acquired by the Angels as well. The Angels are on the outside looking in for a wild card spot. I think they're a game and a half or 2 games back as I'm recording this in the wild card spot. That wild card spot is starting to heat up. I think the Yankees and the Twins are like a game back for that top wild card spot. Diamondbacks are 4.5 games up on the Rockies, and the Milwaukee Brewers are only a game and a half back of the Rockies. Rockies are starting to slip up a little bit, so both in the Major League base, both in the National League and the wild card team, the races are tightening up a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. Justin Verlander, who was rumored to be was on the trade block rumors, wasn't traded during the non-waiver trade deadline, but he was traded to the Astros. Astros have been struggling a little bit, but that's going to be a huge piece to get for them in the postseason going forward. And Astros, it looks like they're going for it all this season to get to the World Series, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Moving on, last piece of news, talk a little bit about college football. Ohio State on Thursday kicked off the season. They beat Indiana after kind of a slow first half. They were trailing in that first half, but they were able to win that game 49-21. Like I said before, I went to the ASU game last night or a couple nights ago. when they played New Mexico State. It was really shaky. That game was just didn't look as great. Defense looks like they still have some problems after last season. I think that we'll see what happens if they're going to bring in that guy, that Bama quarterback from the Alabama transfer. We'll see what happens there, but I mean, this is if Todd Graham doesn't really have a good season this year, he might not be back. I talked to some ASU fans, and they said that the difference between Todd Graham and the previous coach Dennis Erickson was Dennis Erickson. He wasn't a great coach, but he was a decent recruiter. And when Todd Graham came here, some of that recruiting left over from Erickson. Erickson recruited really helped the ASU Sun Devils, and that's why he saw 10 wins back-to-back 10-win seasons in 2013 and 2014, including an appearance in the Pac-12 championship. But we'll just see what happens there. At ASU, it didn't look that great for them. Not a great start, as they only I think they only won the game by 6 points. They were leading that game, I think, by a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but just didn't look great. Manny Wilkins, he made a couple decent throws, but I noticed when I went to that game, some of his elusiveness as a runner, as a mobile quarterback, wasn't really there. So we'll see. I'm not sure if Manny's going to be the quarterback for this entire season, but we'll see what happens. So that's it for my podcast this week. Thanks everybody for watching. Like I said before, check out my 2017 NFL season prediction video that I have for the regular season, the division, who's going to be in the postseason, who's going to be in the conference championship games, and who's going to be in the Super Bowl. Like I've stated before, I appear I'm probably an official regular guest on the Guns N' Roses Central podcast, as we talk about the band Guns N' Roses and what's going on with them, their current news. I appeared on 2 more of those podcasts. You can, if you want to see me in those videos, check the description below in the box. And there's going to probably most likely be another podcast Monday, and so I'm going to appear on that again. So stay tuned on Monday. That's going to probably be around 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. If you're on the West Coast, that's 6 p.m. probably. So thanks everybody for watching. Follow me on Twitter at BaileyLeasure96. If you like the content on my channel, please subscribe and comment on your thoughts on sports topics I talked about. So thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you all later.